When I was asked by Islamic Relief to come to any country where they were doing Ramadan distribution, because of the timing, and at this moment I'm very, very busy, this was not a time I could afford to leave. But I also realized this is not the time when I can afford to say no, because this is my calling. It was an opportunity for me to discover and talk to women who've been through a very tough journey. And if I walked away from this opportunity, I would always regret it. So I didn't even hesitate, and I said yes. During Ramadan, I've always done this from the time that I used to work from home, distributing iftar food packages in the holy month for people who are fasting, the homeless, and also families that are struggling to feed their families during Ramadan. I went to see the distribution at the Islamic Relief Center, and I saw the boxes. I'd seen the contents being packed before, and it was, very practical, a good variety of things that would be great for a family in Ramadan, because you tend to cook a lot of, big dishes, family dishes, because the whole family eats together. So, it's just very well thought out and very practical, and this is the time when people need the extra food, because everyone in the family will get together and eat. So at that one given moment you need to cook a large quantity of food, and you need enough food in the house. And for families like the families we've met who are very vulnerable and deprived, they get this huge boost at a very special time in the month. This box of special donation that is being given out for Ramadan by Islamic Relief, tell me, what is the significance of this box?
Well, through sharing this box, we are share happiness and the spiritual meaning of Ramadan with poor families, with refugees, with the poor host community families. And it's like a gift for them. They can't afford the items inside this box throughout the year, but actually once they have it during Ramadan, it means the whole world for them.
Yeah, and so this, we are in Jordan, and this is going to be given out to the camps in Jordan. But is this given out in other countries as well?
Yeah, we are distributing food parcels over 30 countries. So we are sharing the happiness inside this box with the people, regardless their religions or cultures.
And I'm looking at all the items, and this is all local stuff that you buy here for the local community.
Yeah. Each food parcel contains the basic food needs according to the local food. So as you can see, you can find the powder milk, the flour, the rice, which is something basic for them, the spaghetti and tuna.
So at that one given moment, you need to cook a large quantity of food, and you need enough food in the house. And for families like the families we've met who are very vulnerable and deprived, they get this huge boost at a very special time in the month. In Jordan, I met different women from camps, who some of them had been in the Palestinian camp in Gaza, the Gaza camp for years, and the other were more recently arrived, some as late as 4 years ago from Syria. So they sat out some of the war in Syria and left much later, having been internally displaced. So very different stories. The first person I met was in the Gaza camp was a lovely lady called Zayed. She had 9 children and of Palestinian origin, and she was so welcoming. And what struck me was the emptiness in her kitchen. And I found that really shocking, because there was nothing. You had 9 people in the house, and I couldn't see anything that looked like food. And she was just waiting for the food pack from Islamic Relief, the Ramadan pack, and till then had just been the last few days only having tea with her family. That was quite hard. You could see the struggle in her eyes. But we were able to talk about food. She talked about all the dishes that she would love to make for me, and we were fortunate enough to be able to go back to her house the next day with the packs that were given by Islamic Relief and some extra rations and some bits and bobs, and she was able to cook this dish that she had talked about. And it was great because she was so proud and so competent. She didn't need anyone's help. She was completely in control. And at some point, I had to ask her, because her entire body language changed. She held herself up high. She was talking with great confidence. There was some difference in the way she just talked. And I asked her, how does this make you feel? And her answer stunned me, but also it didn't surprise me, because what she said is, I felt empowered cooking. That is the beauty of food. And this person who clearly has struggled tremendously to feed her family, in cooking that dish and knowing that she could have provided for her family, she felt powerful. And that, really touched me deeply, because I realized that this is how you can empower women. When this whole program was set up, I was excited because there was a possibility that I could cook with the women in the Islamic Center, Islamic Relief. I was very excited because I realized that there was an option for me to cook in the safe space, which is a center set up by Islamic Relief. The other group of women who I met were all Syrians and recently arrived, very traumatized, very obviously traumatized. So very different scenario from Zayed, who was in the Palestinian camp. There she feeds, she struggles to feed her family. Here it was just women who just needed to heal. The wounds were so raw, you could see it in their eyes. And this cooking with them, which was wonderful, was also, in some ways a release for them. I know the healing power of cooking. When you cook together, it is this joint effort. And in the aromas that remind you of home and the familiar smells that come from the spices that you're using, it kind of takes you home. And all the guards, all that pent-up stress that you have, of having left everything familiar, suddenly you kind of feel that you're back home. The women today who were cooking, there was so much strength in that room, so much enthusiasm, absolutely zero, conflict or, debate about anything. That was the most interesting thing. You try and get so many people together to cook anything. I mean, you would think that there would be some argument over it, some dispute. Nothing happened, because the whole point is that they saw the end result for them was very important, that they wanted to produce this beautiful meal. And you didn't see instructions flying around, because this is when you see women at their most powerful, because they have taken on the responsibility, they're going to deliver, and they delivered beautifully within the time that they said it would be ready, and presented it with such pride. This is powerful, because there was no stress and flapping around or someone actually barking out orders. This is not how you cook food. You cook food like you did today. It was completely peaceful, and then there was singing and dancing as well, and people teasing each other. But it was great. And this is, it's always beautiful. I see this in my own family when I go back. I saw it today, and I just think that more people need to see this. They need to see this is how things get done. One of the women we met today, her name's Alia, and she has been here since the beginning of the war in Syria. And she was the one who chose this dish and was in charge of everything. She was completely in control. So the main chicken dish, she was cooking it, and everybody was asking her questions. But when I asked her what food meant to her, and how she felt about these dishes, which have so much symbolism. She started replying, in a very reasonable way, talking about, how important food was, and, and I could, Allah was there interpreting, but, I could make out what she was talking about. But then she talked about her son who died, and this was his favorite food. And then it became very difficult for her. And she cried. And she tried to describe how hard it is to cook these kinds of dishes, because she can't feed the people who she would want to feed, including her brother who's stuck in some no man's land between Jordan and Syria. But cooking for her is important.
فبتحسي عن جد لما تطبخي أكلة مثل هيك إنه
شو بدي أحس؟
على القليل بتتذكري يعني مثلا
الحنين للوطن طبعا.
أنا
على فكرة بس أطبخ شاكرية وبرغل.
She misses home when she cooks?
through cooking.
بس أطبخ شاكرية.
So when she cooks, she misses home?
Yes.
بس أطبخ شاكرية وبرغل.
I also miss home when I cook.
هي كمان بتحن للوطن.
بس أطبخ شاكرية وبرغل مش بحس لحنين. بحس لشيء يعني بداخلي ما بعرف شو هو، بجوز لأن كان ابني يحب هاي الأكلة ما بعرف، وببكي على فكرة وببكي.
المعتقلات اللي كانوا يحبوها وياكلوها ما عاد عندنا نطبخها ولا ناكل.
اللي هي
يعني إذا هلا أخي اللي على الرقبان بدي أعمل أكلة وأصورها وأبعث لي إياها ببكي ما بقدر. لأنه هو محروم من كل شيء ما بياكل.
Tell her just to cook.
I'm sorry.
Women in Syria have stopped making these dishes because their family not around. Food is such a powerful thing, it's our way home. But when home becomes this place you can't reach, then you can't cook this food. It's incredibly nice that they're actually cooking this food here. But she was saying she finds it difficult to cook these food dishes. All these women were agreeing that these dishes you can't cook. I can understand how that can happen. But it's just been really, they're incredibly brave. But it's heartbreaking to watch. And as an immigrant, I've always felt that this is, food was my way home. But this is the first time when you realize that you don't cook it because you can't go home. But I think it's going to be fabulous what she's cooking. She's cooking with so much passion and love. It's going to be great. But it was not, her crying because she felt so weak and helpless. It was very different. It's difficult to explain, but when women cry, not because they're falling apart, but they cry because they're strong. And that was how she was weeping. I could make out. And so she didn't need sympathy. She wept out of frustration and anger, talking about, and one of the sweetest things she said is that, whenever I cook these dishes, I pray for people in prison, people who are trapped in no man's land, people who are unable to eat this kind of food, because it's like a blessing. They can't eat the food, but I pray for them and I think they can feel it. I think what has surprised me the most over here is the resilience of the women I've met. They remind me of bamboos, they bend with the wind, and they may be hollow inside, but there's that strength that comes. I come from India where, if people are, painting a building or building any infrastructure, they make these things with bamboos, and then they tie them up together, and it's so strong because bamboo is so strong, yet it bends. And I just think that these women remind me of that. They remind me of that. Those, they have that strength in them, but you can make out that you can see the emptiness in their eyes, and the kind of life they're leading. But phenomenal strength and their will to live and their will to survive. It's impressive. Painful as it was a huge high, huge celebration with the kind of the traditional calling out of blessings by the women when the food was ready. And all the pain and the sorrow seemed to have disappeared when the food was taken out. And this is the beauty of food, that it can have this, they were just so proud and so happy to share their food with me, which, we had been cooking together. And that kind of, welcome, that people sit you down and they eat the rice with you, it's a unique experience. I remember this for a long time. I've always felt this, that, cooking is part of giving yourself into that dish, because, the most expensive and invaluable ingredient that goes into every dish is your time. It's not the saffron, and it's not the spices, and it's not the expensive, meat that you're putting into a dish. That time never comes back that you put into that dish. So when you're cooking something, it's more a kind of, it's your physical being that goes into, the strength that goes into cooking. And if you're cooking for large numbers, it is exhausting. And I think that I realized this, of course, because I cook for very large numbers. And now with the restaurant and my rest of my team cooking, the biryani I still cook, and that's for 100 people. The physical strength required is hard work. It's just not just the stirring and the moving, but standing for 5-6 hours and cooking. It's not a small thing. It's, it is a labor of love. People often say this about lots of things, but for food, definitely true. Because, you do not get back your time again, or get back the effort you put in any way. But what you get is the pleasure of seeing someone eat the food you cooked. And, and it is draining, it's tiring, it's tough. It's very, very tough. Physically, it's very tough. Emotionally as well. I've always believed that food is the way home. And I wanted to come to a place to see where the circumstances are a bit different from my personal circumstances. And also a lot of women that I've been working with in the kitchen, where, it's been our choice to move home. And yet there is that kind of deep longing, and food becomes this balm that you need to heal your soul, because you feel so lost. And I wanted to see what, how it affects people who've left because they had no choice, and left often in circumstances which were awful, or left people behind who they loved. And I was just wanting to see how does it affect them, because I know what food means to all of us, where home is somewhere else. And the most beautiful memories of food is often a place where you cannot go back. I would describe this as an eye-opener. I think that I had not completely understood that it is possible to be strong and weak at the same time. And this has been the one thing that I discovered on this trip, that I had expected the women to be resentful, bitter, angry. And there are shades of all of that still. But all the women I spoke to, at the end, showed strength. And today, at the end of the meal, one of them told me, the next meal we have will be in my house in Syria. And I think that is just so beautiful. Chances of that are almost zero, but she said it. And that is the beauty of people who I've met, that, for her to have said it in complete seriousness, with a lot of love, she invited me to her house, which may not even be existing. I mean, I know the area that she comes from has been carpet bombed, but it just is humbling as well to see that, there is that strength, and there's that positivity that, it's going to be okay. Everybody feels that they can't help refugees because it's like this kind of unending problem, just going to give money, it's just going to go down the drain, it's not going to actually make a difference. But, if they actually look at their own lives, and think about, close their eyes and think about that one person who made a difference to their lives, they will understand that they didn't get where they have by just being there doing everything on their own. Someone made a difference to their life. There was that turning point in their life. And they can be that turning point for the refugee family by supporting them now, giving them something small, but lifting them up. And, and this would make all the difference to them. It was tough organizing this. It's been very difficult, but completely the right call. Completely the right call, because it has allowed me to be of service in some ways and inspire and talk to other women. And I know this from their reaction and their response, that they were very kind and said that they felt strong after talking to me. And if I had not made this journey, I would never have met these people, and also not discovered so much about myself as well. I've seen things that have deeply moved me, and I'm very glad I came.